Hi, I'm Jeremy, and today I'm going to show you a classic game by the name of New England. This is a kind of auction game and a tile laying game where players are going to be playing competing pilgrim families who are trying to extend their influence in the colony of Plymouth. It has a really unique auction mechanism, and it has some interesting decisions to make while you're placing tiles. I think I'll take a moment to show you the rules, and then I'll come back and give you my thoughts on it. Okay, so here we see the recommended setup for a 4-player game of New England. If players want to, they could take turns placing these, with the last player placing first, just so that any of these two initial plots, which will represent the families that the players are controlling over the course of the game, could not be placed horizontally adjacent to each other. Diagonal is fine. But this would be the recommended setup. I believe that was there. And what we see here is a map of Plymouth. And the players are going to be playing various families who are going to try to gain influence with the most prosperous farms in Plymouth. So then here we see essentially what is the bidding track for the game, as well as a row of spaces for tiles and cards to be laid out. Also, there is going to be money. The game comes with 1 and 5 chips for money. Each player will start with 12 money. There are these 3 bonus cards, 2, 3, and 4 in value for the player with the most pilgrims, the most barns, and the most ships at the end of the game. And there are pilgrim, barn, and ship markers, which you could see here. Those are just wooden pieces that you will be placing on tiles. The game also comes with a first player marker and these rather useless markers, which are used when you are declaring a development. And finally, there's this stack of cards. So on a typical turn of this, the first player will get to say how many cards and how many tiles they want to draw. You'll notice that at least 3 of these spaces require cards, 3 of the spaces require tiles, and the other 3 will be at the discretion of the first player. So the first player may say, I want 5 tiles, and that would leave 4 cards. So they would draw from the bag 5 tiles. And these are 2-sided tiles of the different land types that correspond with these markers. Each player is going to be able to extend their land types with tiles of the same color, and then remaining spaces would be filled in with cards. So you would just draw until those are filled. And these cards essentially come in 2 main types. And there are these cards here, which they're all called development cards. There are cards that will allow you to place a token on an unclaimed land, and then there are going to be cards that allow you to develop land. All these land tiles, including the single-size land tiles, on their back show some form of development, so either cattle or crops or houses. So after the first player has done that, they see what's basically available to be drafted by the players, and what they'll do is they will grab one of these tokens, and these tokens serve 2 purposes. First of all, they will allow you to determine what your price is for each of the up to 2 items that you're going to buy from down here, and second of all, they are going to let you determine your turn order. The person paying the highest price will get to go first. So let's say this player really wants this, so they might, for example, pick the 6. That means it'll be guaranteed almost to go first. But if another player picked the 7, since you only begin with 12, you would only be able to buy 1 thing during that round, and that's fine. You could buy 0, 1, or 2 things during a round. So the next player might take the 4, another a 3, and then the last player says, I'm fine just paying 1. So then in the order of highest value first, players will take turn buying up to 2 of these things. So this player might use all 12 of their money to buy 2 tiles, or to buy a tile, and to buy a card. So let's say they buy this card. So anything that you buy generally will need to be used right away. So if you buy a tile, for example, you're this player, you'd have to add it to extend your existing lot of that color. You would not be, if your lot was cut off, you would not be able to buy a tile of that color. So there is a bit of a land grab at the start of the game. So let's say this player just goes over here, and again it has to be horizontally or vertically adjacent to your area. And then with this tile, or that would be a really bad move. Let's say they picked this space here. So this is a barn tile that allows you to place a barn onto any undeveloped area. So you would just place it like that, and then that would end that player's turn. So what are you trying to do by doing all this? First of all, I'll explain the various types of cards. So the barn, the way that they work, they allow you to place a barn on the board that can never be moved once it's placed there. It'll be worth 1 point at the end of the game. And then what the barn lets you do is, in the future, if you took a card that you couldn't execute right away, you'd be able to keep it under your barn. So for each barn you could save 1 card. Otherwise, you would not be able to claim this card unless you could develop that land right away. So the way that the development works, say this player had to place this barn, they place this, and then on a subsequent turn they bought this card. You see that there's this configuration of 4 houses in a row on that type of land. They would be able to immediately turn that in, and then they would get to flip off these 4 tiles, again because they are in a square configuration that matches the configuration on this card, and they would keep the card in front of them. That'd be 10 points at the end of the game. So these cards come in various shapes for the various land types. So here you need 3 in an L shape like that, and these could be rotated like that, but you would need distinctly 2 over 1 up, or however that would work out to get those 6 points, and it would have to be on the matching fields, the green fields. And then here's an example of a 3-point scoring one. This one only requires 2 adjacent tiles. You'll note that your starting tile is 2 tiles large. That's the only tile that is that. You could use that to work towards one of these, but for example, if we had another green tile down like that, and let's say something like that, right? And the player had one of those L-shaped cards like this, and they flipped, well, they could just flip these 2. But if ever you would be in a situation where you would have to flip over half of this, you would not be able to count the other one towards another card. Similarly, this double tile would only be able to hold one of these figures. So only 1 barn or 1 pilgrim, as I'll show you in a minute. So the pilgrim cards, they are here. They cost 1 coin to bring into play. That's what this symbol means. They're worth 1 point at the end of the game, and they allow you to place a pilgrim. So the pilgrim, like the barn, has to be placed onto an undeveloped space. Once you've developed it, you can't place it there. And you would just take the marker. So for example, this player would be able to place that there, and they would pay their coin. And then what will happen is that pilgrim, at the end of each phase, will give you an extra income. So the pilgrims help you get income to help in this auction phase. Unlike the barns, these can be moved freely by the player onto another tile that they own. So over there, I guess, would be another possible movement. And then the last type of card are these ship cards. So these ship cards could only be placed on the spaces around the edge that border the water. So we have Chesapeake Bay, or was it Cape Cod Bay rather, and here's Plymouth Rock. So I guess that's how thematic this game gets. Again, these will give you 1 point. You can place them on a development tile that's next to the water. So for example, like that, or rather an undeveloped tile only, still. And what they do is each round, players who have the most ships or are tied for the most ships will be able to either pull another tile or flip another card before they do their action of buying their up to 2 cards or tiles, and those are just get set by the board, so it just increases their selection. And again, if you're tied for that, you would be able to get that as well. So at the end of the round, after everybody's bought up to 2 things here, and again, they don't replenish between players. So if you're going later in turn order with the one turn or the 1 coin chip, you would get to buy these things for 1, but you'd have a more limited selection. So after that has happened, after everybody's taken their turn, this will get swept out. The start player marker will go to the next player. They'll be able to declare how they want to fill this, splitting the difference between the cards and the tiles, and it'll keep going like that until during one of those turns when you either go to draw a card or you go to draw a tile, and the board cannot be filled with the requested number, that would immediately end the game, and you'll go into endgame scoring. In endgame scoring, you'll look up cards that you have face up in front of you and tally up all the points on those. So 12 points, for example, here. And then you would reward these 3 bonus cards for the person with the most pilgrims, the person with the most barns, and the person with the most ships. After doing that, whoever has the and these, in the case of a tie, everybody will get the points. And after doing that, the player with the most points wins. And then if there's still a tie, it would be the tiebreaker would be whoever has the most money. And if it's still a tie, then there's more than one winner. So that is how you play New England. Okay, so that is New England. And this game, like I said, it plays 3 to 4 players. It's definitely, I think, thought of more as a 4-player game, but I found a 3-player variant on Board Game Geek on this game's game page under variants that suggests removing some tiles and doing the initial draft differently, and I think it plays really well with 3 players with those rules. So if you're looking for a 3-player version of this, I would suggest looking on Board Game Geek. This game is designed by Alan Moon and Aaron Weissblum. So these guys are a design team who I believe designed games like San Marco and a few others, and they work really well together. This game has nice streamlined rules. It's very obvious after the first round, how your strategy should start to develop. Yet at the same time, it's relatively agonizing the way that turn order bidding works. If you want to go first and have the best chance of grabbing cards from the display, then you're really going to have to pay for those. And other players know it. Early on in the game, it's not especially tight, the map. Even though there are a lot of starting places on there, you could pretty much expand from anywhere. But very quickly, other players will begin bearing down on you, and your options will grow increasingly limited, with the possibility of one of your colonies just getting enclosed and shut off, so you can't even buy a color or a tile of a given color over the course of the game. Beyond that, I think that there's this interesting economic aspect of the game. Do you want to grab pilgrims or do you want to grab land is one of the big early game decisions. And those ships, which allow you to flip over an extra card or an extra tile, are not to be underrated, because you could then go later in turn order and still have a little bit of choice, even if you're only paying 1 or 2 money. Whereas people who pay a lot for the privilege to go first, they might only draft 1 tile as a result of that. So that's a really interesting balancing mechanism as well. As is the thing that each tile or each card has to be played immediately. It really changes the way that you approach the game, unless of course you have those barns. So every element in this game really works against one of the other elements of the game, and that means, to me, that's a really tight design. Again, I would say that it does work best with 4. If that's a problem, if you want to play with 5 or 3 or 2, it's not going to necessarily be the game for you. But for a game that plays in about an hour, maybe an hour and a half, it works really well. It's something that I've had for years and something I've enjoyed for years. I even made this custom tile bag for it. That's how much I like the game. And every time I bring it out to the table, I'm wondering why I don't bring it out more often. So I think that's high praise. It's a game that is currently out of print. I think it was printed originally, I want to say 2003. Let me look. Yeah, 2003, I was right. I've seen tons of used copies of it, however. So there's an Uber Play version, which is published in English, and I believe there's also a German version, which would be fine because the game's completely language independent. So, and it could be had more cheaply than most new games that you would get, and it's, I'd say, more enjoyable than most, as long as you could deal with the fact that it plays best with 4 players. So those are my thoughts on New England, and thanks for watching.